Okay.
Get that going. I kind of want to see this one get on too. So recording is on. There's 16, set 20. People are getting in. That's good.
Hello and welcome, everybody. Thanks for joining us this morning. We're setting up a few more things. We're going to give everyone just a few more minutes to kind of come in, and then we'll get started. If you have any technical difficulties, please let us know in the chat. You will be muted for the duration of the presentation, but we'll have some spots where you can ask some questions in the Q&A box.
Thank you, Heather. Justin and I are looking forward to speaking with you, and we just have a few more minutes and let everybody get in here for the presentation and discussion.
Welcome.
As some of you are getting into the webinar, just take a look at your panel there and you'll see Q&A as we go through this. Justin and I look forward to any questions you have, and we'll do our best to answer those. So that's one thing that we'll go through as we get everybody online here. I know we're going to have quite a few people joining us, so we're looking forward to that. But yeah, if you have questions, let us know. We're going to pause along the way and address some of those questions best we can. And we'll also get you our contact information as well. So if you have a question maybe that you'd like to talk to Justin more one-on-one, we can arrange for that as well. So a couple more minutes and we'll get rolling. Okay, looks like people are getting signed in, and we're looking forward to an informative,
Very informative, actually.
session.
Yeah, very informative.
And we want to thank some of our colleagues for joining us as well, who are sending us some nice chats, most of them positive. That's good. Thank you.
Let me know how my hair looks, please. OECS team.
We won't be calling anyone out by name. We love it. Awesome. So again, as you get logged in, get comfortable. Q&A, we want that to flow. We will actually have some polls too, several. And we're going to ask you to participate to kind of help us get a gauge.
Lots of interaction, so please participate. We want this to be as interactive as possible, like Mr. Sheehan said. And we look forward. We're going to shoot for about an hour. We're going to do our best to keep it at that time point. So
Absolutely. Good. And Heather is our Zoom advisor who is online as well. And she said, if you have any questions, issues, use chat. She'll have visibility to that. We can get you through that. So we are just about a minute away here, and I see quite a few people are joining right now. So welcome. Justin and I look forward to talking to you here in a minute, and we'll go through all the details of what we intend to cover here.
and thank you for taking the time to to sit through this. We hope to provide some good information. We hope to provide to answer any questions and just give some guidance on this particular topic. So thank
We're ready to roll.
Yeah.
And good morning. And thanks everybody for joining the OECS team on accident investigation webinar. And Justin and I are your presenters today. Justin has years of experience in the safety business, including 10 years with Minnesota OSHA. And we're going to draw on that experience here today to make this an informative session for you. But before we go, a few of the housekeeping things. If you have a question on your panel there, you have Q&A. Send those to us. We'll have visibility to that, ourselves and Heather, and we will work through those questions as we go. The second thing is we're going to ask you to participate in some polls. And if you could quick respond to those, it gives us a guide and a feel for how much experience this group has and some of the things that we want to focus this presentation on. Our personal email addresses and phone numbers will be available at the very end, so you can reach out to us directly And if you would like to rewatch this or share this with someone, it will be on our website here probably within a day or so. So let's do a quick poll. Ready, set, go. We're trying to get a gauge here. Number one, we want to know, are you ready? Do you have the process and training in place to handle an incident investigation? Or two, you have some, but you need more work, and maybe that's why you're on the webinar. Or answer three, if you're not ready and you are being very honest and you're saying, you know what, we need some help getting a plan initiated. So if you could respond to that quick poll, that would be very helpful. Gives us an idea of what some of the needs of the group are and how to customize our presentation. And so far, it looks like we have quite a few people who are a two. That's fair.
Oh.
Excuse me.
And towards the end, Heather is going to share with us the poll results to kind of give everybody an idea of where we're at.
So as we go through that, sure, let's share, Heather, see where we're at. So we can see there about 74% are saying, hey, we have some experience, but we have some work to do on our plan, and that's good. We'll work with you on that. And that's why we think you'll get a lot of value from the presentation today. And it's really good to see that almost 20% are ready. And we're going to ask you to retake this at the end and see if you still feel that way. And some of you, of course, are going, hey, you know what? This is why we're here today, too. We want to get a plan together. So as I advance the slide here, let's see here. I want to get to the next slide on the screen here, and maybe we can do a manual move. But the next slide here would basically talk to us about, as we get the technology working, our 5 C's. And this will come build for you on the screen. The 5 C's are about getting to the commitment of leadership to address a situation like this, a serious situation. That's why we're glad that so many of you are joining us today, because it starts with the commitment. We want to commend you for the fact that you did join, because that shows that you really are trying to improve the safety for your team and your company. But we also understand, you know, at OECS that the compliance part of this is really foundational. You know, understanding some of the planning and some of the regulations that you must follow is essential to this, because this in turn is what helps you build a strong safety culture. And when you're building a strong safety culture, you're going to need data, you're going to need experience that we're going to draw on from today's presentation to help form and shape that culture. And what we have found is that when you really work on, you know, shaping that culture, you start to see there are a number of champions within your organization. You don't need a lot of those, but when the safety champions emerge, they're the ones who really help drive the whole process along with you. And ultimately, it makes your business more efficient because of the cost factor there. Justin, I'm going to turn it over to you if you can start us going through here the learning objectives.
Absolutely. So we're going to cover some basic injury and accident statistics. The fact is these things do happen. So we'll cover some of those. We're going to define the difference between accident and near miss. What to do at the scene of an incident. Something happened. What are we going to do? Are we prepared? Do we have a team ready? We're going to go through all that. How to interview witnesses. That's a huge part of this. And we'll talk about the different kind of witnesses that you may encounter. We're also going to talk about how to write an incident report, you know, how to organize and lay it out. And then we're also going to do some case studies. And I want to start by saying with the case studies, they are graphic. I'm drawing from my experience at Minnesota OSHA. I threw together 3 that I think are going to help paint a picture of you know, how a safety culture and a lack of a safety culture, I should say, kind of drives a lot of these incidents. So we'll get into that kind of stuff. So just some fast facts. I'm not going to read these word for word, but the fact is stuff does happen. 27% of the 900,380 non-fatal work injuries were related to slips, trips, and falls. So, you know, those are typically areas you want to target if we're seeing near misses and things like that. And 235,740 were due to contact with objects and equipment, typically getting pulled in machinery, stuff like that. And then there's a lot of motor vehicle accidents. So the fact is these things do happen and we need to be prepared. So a quick overview of the presentation. In this webinar, we're going to go through definition of terms. We're going to cover the purpose. What is the primary purpose of this accident investigation? Preparation, being prepared, being ready to go, visiting the incident scene. That's a big one. Interviewing witnesses like we talked about. Then once we have that evidence, our notes and our pictures, how do we analyze that? And then when we're writing our report, depending on who's doing it, we're going to have kind of a recommendation on how to lay out that report. And again, we'll cover case studies, and then we're going to conclude. And hopefully at the end of this, if you have questions, please let us know. We want everybody in here to feel good at the end of this, whether they want to ask for more help or just, we feel better about preparing for an incident.
Right. And quick poll for you here. We just need to gauge real quick. Have you led this process before? Yes, that would be a 1. And 2 would be, I've helped, I was involved, but I did not lead. And 3 was, I have not had experience doing either. So if you could quick respond, gives us a gauge again of where the experience level is with the group and how we might be able to help fill in some of those gaps as Justin talked about. So since we have a lot to cover, we'll take this one pretty quick here. So it looks to me that we've got, almost 40, actually 50% roughly that have done it before, and 27 that have helped, and a quarter of you have not been involved. So this is going to really work well for all of you. I think we can fine tune some of the things for those who've gone through it, and those that have not led it, you're going to be more equipped at the end. Justin?
Yeah. Just bear with us here, the slides. After the polls, the slides tend to slow down a little bit, so we're letting our computers catch up. We apologize.
There you go.
There we go. All right, sped through there. So definition of terms. Let's talk about what an accident is versus a near miss. An accident is any unforeseen event which causes injury or property damage. A near miss is any unforeseen event that causes a disruption in the workflow, however, does not cause any injuries or property damage. And for the sake of this training, an incident refers to both accident and a near miss. So just kind of clear those words up. So the purpose of an incident investigation and facts. Let's get through, let's find out why we're doing this. And the number one thing is try to prevent the event from occurring again. That is the number one goal of any accident investigation. So we want to make sure that when we're investigating these things, we identify the incident so we can put the controls in place to ensure they do not happen again. It could be training, it could be a better maintenance schedule, whatever the case may be. Our goal is to come out of this with ways to prevent this from happening again. And also, we should keep all of our incident investigations on file. You don't know who you will need it for, yourself, your insurance company. So we'll talk about making sure we keep this stuff. And also remember, these incident investigations are not intended to be used for discipline. We're trying to find facts or fact finding, not fault finding. So please remember that. And also this process will encourage people to share what they've seen if they were an eyewitness, if they were in the area. So we want to make sure this is an open process and that we try to get to the main root cause of this so we can prevent it. And usually people are on board with that. So we're going to start with the very first case study. This one was, I did this, it was near Mountain Lake. A young man, 17 years old, showed up for work before school and was told to empty out a feed trailer. The trailer was still hooked up to the semi, the PTO was engaged, and the feed trailer has compartments on it, and his job, he was told to go up on top of that thing. They had a long poker stick, and he's supposed to poke down in those compartments and get all the remaining feed out of the trailer as the auger's going. And the young man was inexperienced, had very little safety training, and he decided to climb down into one of the compartments. And when he did that, he kicked at one of the corners and it grabbed his foot and it pulled his leg off at the knee. The young man did survive. I couldn't believe it. He did. So this is a case study where now I'm going to take a quick look. When we see stuff, when something happens, you initially say, oh, it must have been this. And we have to make sure we don't jump to conclusions. But as I started digging through this, there's no lockout, tagout, no procedures, no policies. The safety program was very limited and outdated, and the owner only did training or some training for the full-time employees and not these part-time employees. There was no confined space policy, which in that case, that compartment was a confined space. And so I asked this group, was this young man given the tools to make the right decisions? Do you think this young man knew the danger he was in as he was doing this particular job? So please share with us what you think on that. And as we go through these case studies, we've got 2 more after this. And again, I apologize if it's graphic, but I want us to, at the end of this, look at these 3 case studies and say, I see a pattern here. I see something, there's something very obvious going on here. And I'll be honest with you, it all ties back to culture, program, accountability, and training. And we'll get into that.
So Justin, a good question came in on, and one of the things that they struggle with is those accidents that tread the line between an accident and a near miss.
Mhm.
I bump something and transfer a bit of paint on my forklift. Is that really property damage? Does it matter to call out an accident versus near miss in the case, or is the reporting and documentation the most important part?
Yeah, just document it. We want to try not to get caught up in the exact, what's this defined as? The fact is there was an incident and something was hit. It sounds like paint was spilled. And, we have to make sure we look at every single incident if we think there's room for improvement. So let's not get caught up in, was it a near miss? Was it an incident? Let's just take a look at it and say, hey, was there a deficiency here? And we need to look at it. And so I would say in that particular situation, you would definitely look at that situation.
Great.
If I know what's going on.
Okay, good. Let's go ahead.
Yeah. So incident facts, a majority of accidents are forecasted by near misses. We just talked about that. We highly encourage our clients to have a strong near miss program. It's one of the toughest things to get people to do because oftentimes employees think that they're going to get punished for that, but we encourage that. Those near misses typically forecast what may happen in the future. So we want to really try to emphasize having a strong program for near misses. And by investigating these incidents, we can eliminate the causes. And again, the main goal. And unless causes are eliminated, these same things will keep reoccurring. And I can't tell you how many times at OSHA I saw that. I'd look at logs and I'd see slip, trip, fall. And it's like, we need to look at this. So when we talk about incident facts, Herbert Heinrich has a triangle that he talks about where for every one major injury, there were 29 minor and 300 near misses prior to that. So again, we look at those at-risk behaviors, those 300 near misses, and it's kind of a numbers game. If we have enough at-risk behaviors, eventually we're going to start hitting these other milestones, which we don't want to hit. So investigation preparation, this is where we need to have a plan in place, and we'll get into some of this stuff, but we want to be prepared before something happens. We don't want to be running around wondering who's going to participate, what do we do, who's got the camera. We want to have a system in place, a set system where we know how to handle it. It's timely and effective. So, and the main goal, what happened? What's the true cause of this? Not just what I think it was. What's the true cause of this? What's the root cause? Identify corrective actions and prevent future occurrence. That is our main goal.
Quick reality check, Justin, as we were talking about this a couple of days ago, it made me think, in your experience at OSHA, how many folks had a plan that was organized, had some training involved, and some practice, frankly?
To be flat honest with you, a very low percentage.
Okay. So the fact that folks are participating today, they can bring themselves to a whole nother level if they implement and execute these recommendations that are really coming from OSHA. And that's where we drew a lot of this from, because there's a body of work and experience beyond Justin's. I just want to emphasize with folks that it wasn't uncommon, as he explained it to me, that most people had none of this in place.
Absolutely. So preparation, time is absolutely critical. When we have an incident, an accident, we want to make sure we're out there as fast as possible. We need to get out there, get to the scene, see who, identify eyewitnesses. We want to make sure that things are timely and focus on what's going on. So preparation, we want to make sure that we have all the necessary resources at the scene. Again, we'll talk about what we think you should have in some kind of kit. Doesn't need to be exactly like that, but some basic tools we'll need. And then preparation, we want to make sure that the preparation is taken as seriously as the actual investigation. So who is on your team? If you have something now, take a look and say, do we have the right members on our team? I want you to look and say, and if you don't have anybody, I want you to look around and say, who would be a good member of this team? It could be an upper management, workers from the area. You have safety committees. You got a safety supervisor. You may have a maintenance supervisor who typically knows a lot about the machinery and the operation. So you want to look around and say, who do we think would be an effective part of the committee or this team to help us get to these causes? So take a look around and say, you know what, I think we need to get a team together if we don't have anything. And if we have a team, do we have a good team? Is it an effective team? Should we add somebody? And we've even seen, like on the screen, these flow charts. Some have a flow chart saying team leader, this is who's doing this, and just outlining responsibilities, roles, and from beginning to end. So there's different ways you can do it. You don't need to have this. You don't need to have really anything written, as long as you guys effectively communicate it and be ready to go. So we're getting into case study number 2. This was the very first fatality I did at OSHA, where a young man was pulled into a conveyor. He was greasing a zerk valve. It was an outside rock crushing operation, and it was a 2 to 3 minute job, and the young man lost his life. And the machine was not turned off. There was no lockout tagout. The safety program was very generic and outdated. There were no procedures in place. There was a way to turn the conveyor off. It wasn't even turned off. Perfect world, it's turned off, it's locked out, and there was no supervision on the work site, and a lone worker, he was the only one on the site. So when we look at all these quick look things, and on the surface, what do you guys think? Was this young man set up for success? Or is this a situation where oftentimes I would hear, well, the employee just did it wrong, or the employee should have known better? Is that a good assessment? Absolutely not. So let's get into some of this stuff.
So Justin, one of the questions that came up as you go to the let's discuss section here is the safety committee, because I know with our clients, we really emphasize and reinforce, to be in compliance with OSHA, depending on the size of the organization, you need to have a safety committee, but really just the function and value a safety committee can bring. It seems like this activity and organizing this should be a part of their agenda.
100%. From my experience, the safety committees, if they even have one, are very underused. It's usually a place where they, get coffee, eat donuts, and talk about the weather. It's important to have a committee that's actually active, participating, and use this committee. Use them to identify patterns and near misses, and use them as part of the team. You want to make them feel like they're a valuable part of this whole process. So I encourage everybody, if you don't have a safety committee, please think about getting one in place and using that committee. Take them out on the floor, do some audits.
Because that makeup of that committee really mirrors what we just outlined here that you would need. So that's great.
Absolutely.
Any other questions, please go ahead to Q&A and send them in, and we'll take care of those as we go. Thanks.
Yeah. And so as far as equipment goes, and I encourage everybody participating in this, you may want to just get a kit together, have something in a bucket, in a separate room. Clipboard, paper, tape measure, digital camera. I can't emphasize that enough. A digital camera. Photos are worth 1,000 words. Graph paper, straight edge ruler, pens, and pencils, because you may be sketching some stuff. It's very rough, but there are times you may want to sketch something that a picture can't exactly get. A flashlight, high visibility plastic tape, and envelope. So again, this is not everything you may need, and it may be more than what you need. So just assess what you may need in your facility and get this kit together. And so now we're going to get into visiting the scene. So the incident happens, near miss happens, accident happens. We have to make sure that we are on top of our game. We need to get out there in a timely manner and try to preserve whatever the scene is, whether it's a piece of machinery or whether there were eyewitnesses and they left the facility. We need to make sure we're out there as soon as possible to start gathering these eyewitnesses and just start getting the facts in place. And so the big thing is make sure when we get to a scene, an accident scene, that the area is safe for everybody. Make sure that there's, machines not still operating if somebody got their hand cut in there or something like that. We want to make sure injured personnel are taken care of, ensure management is aware of the situation, secure the area. You want to get that area secured so you can do a good assessment, identify potential eyewitnesses, physical evidence, sketch the scene if you need to. Your pictures may not be that good, or your camera's not that good. You may want to identify something, take photographs. I can't emphasize that enough, and collect any critical evidence that you may want to analyze at a later time.
One of the things that is a theme here that you've hit on, Justin, a number of times, and I want to underscore for everybody here, is often, sometimes in safety, we caution people against going too fast speed. In this activity, speed is of the essence. So if there's one takeaway, if there's anything that we hope you all come away with, is it's actually getting involved in launching the investigation as fast as you can. And we're going to come up with some other points, is really essential.
Absolutely. And just know your investigation, this is internal. depending on the severity of the incident or the accident, OSHA may come out there. There are reporting requirements for amputations, inpatient hospitalizations, fatalities. So just know that this is your investigation. This is your situation, and you're the first one on site no matter what. OSHA may not be there for another day, and they may ask you to try to preserve what it is, but you're going to have the freshest, most pertinent information from the get-go. So, and also know your internal investigation may have stuff that the OSHA person may not ask for, and you're still going to correct that in-house. So, and we'll talk about that as we go on. So sketching the scene doesn't need to be very detailed, but you may want to sketch a general, where a machine was or where a forklift was before it hit somebody, something like that. And try to use a ruler maybe, or a quarter if you have any issue with scale and how big something is. Photograph the scene. I can't emphasize enough. I can't tell you how many times a photograph that I took when I was at OSHA, I went back and looked at it and answered a question that I had that I didn't ask. So take pictures. Again, use a ruler or a quarter if there's a situation where you need to identify the scale of it.
You put that earlier in the kit. I'm going, why the heck do you need a ruler? And your point is you put that alongside a portion of the accident, and really that way you can get a picture to get the size and scale of it. Does a phone camera work?
It does. It can. It's not. You may not want to rely on that because phones die. They don't have, the quality camera maybe that a digital one would have. So
you could use your phone and a digital camera.
Yes.
The more the better.
The more the better.
Okay. Absolutely. And then when you talk about taking pictures, there's what people might think I'm going to get right where it happened and zoom in. Your point has been with me earlier that you really got to look at the whole surrounding too.
Absolutely.
Get things that you may or may not think were part of it.
You always want those, take a step back photos, but you may have a photo that is zoomed in on a manufacturer serial number that you may need. So again, you're going to have ones that encompass the whole area, and then ones that are very, very specific.
Take a lot of pictures.
A lot of pictures.
All right.
Tons of pictures, and avoid jumping to conclusions. It's very easy to have that snap judgment. Oh, well, clearly the person just walked out in front of the forklift. We want to avoid that. We want to go in there unbiased, open to everything. That way we start gathering facts, we get them all together, and then we analyze them. And so just know that this is a very common issue where people be like, well, I know what happened.
Because he looks like when you put that kind of body language across the table of the group there, I got it figured out.
He knows exactly what's going on.
Right?
Yeah.
Be careful.
So again, we want to make sure that we don't just assume something if we don't have any of the facts yet.
Let's take another poll here. The question here is, when when it comes to the incident, what are they caused by? The environment, or an action, or a decision by the folks involved? So this is just a quick gut check. We should. It's a no-brainer in terms of what the answer should be here, based on some of those stories that Justin shared earlier. So we appreciate you weighing in on that poll. And we know from learning here that as soon as we lock this up, we'll take them off the screen and move on to the next slide. But Heather, why don't you go ahead and show? I think we got everybody on board that, B, then action or decision is a big part of that. And we were just checking to make sure that you're all sticking with us here. Thank you.
Well, apparently people were studying before this webinar, so nice job. It's an action or a decision. 9 times out of 10, when something happens, it is a decision, an action, and it could be anything from a decision based off of complacency, based off of inexperience, too much experience, based off of speed. Hey, safety is important until we're really busy. So it's absolutely, and that's why as part of an effective safety program, you want to target those actions, those behaviors. If you can get to the bottom of that and start minimizing those at-risk behaviors, you're gonna stop getting those those injuries and near misses and all that stuff. All right, once again, we're slowing down again. Let me try to get this thing going. All right, there we go. So interviewing witnesses, we're moving on here. This is absolutely critical. You may have an eyewitness, you may not have an eyewitness. It just depends on the situation, but we want to make sure that we identify who can help us in any way, shape, or form. And so we want to make sure that we have the witness, identify if they were there before the incident, during or after the incident, and get to that interview as soon as possible. But this can be tricky. This can be really tricky because if it's a serious situation where something really tragic happened, there's a lot of emotions, and people shut down. They may not want to talk about it. So we'll get it.
Some
as we
people
get
may
into
leave the
this.
scene and not want to come back to
Mhm.
work,
That's common. That's very common.
right?
On fatalities. Yep. So what kind of witnesses are we looking for here? We're looking for the ones that absolutely that had firsthand eyewitness experience. We may interview people that came to the scene immediately afterwards, that seen the aftermath. The ones who've seen leading up to it. I was there 5 minutes before it happened, and then personnel who have expertise in the work tasks that were being performed. So we may want to, you may have all these in an incident. You may have one of these. You may have none of these.
So it's really the folks who witnessed it to the folks who came in after it happened to, those who may have seen something prior to then another outside ring, if you will, is people who understand the job or have some expertise in how it should work. It sounds like you got to look for folks in all of those buckets.
Absolutely.
Okay.
And also be prepared. I had an incident where a semi driver went behind a semi, it rolled back and crushed him between the loading dock, and it was midnight. There were no witnesses. There was nobody there. And so we just kind of had to go. We interviewed other truck drivers. We interviewed people that were there the morning of the day after. And so you may have to do an incident investigation and just deduce things based off of what you see leading up and afterwards. So just keep that in mind. So putting the witness at ease, this is absolutely critical because again, these, depending on the situation, you may have people, there may be a lot of emotions going on, and we want to make sure that they are at ease and they understand that this is a fact-finding process. This is not about pointing blame. This is not about getting people in trouble. We want to make sure that we're not pointing fingers. Like I said, it's a lot of people get really tense in situations like this. So get a private location and put yourself between the witness and the exit door. Make sure they know they have a way out. Otherwise, we don't want to give them that trap feeling. So just keep that in mind. And also try to have the witness give a written statement prior to or even after your interview. However you get it, a written statement is always critical because they may put something in that written statement that when they give the interview, a verbal one, it may not have this, it may have something else that may not have been uncovered. So, and then also just, if you can, and I've done this a lot, you slide photographs across the table. If they're not sure where something was, or you can use your photographs and all of your evidence to help them remember things and help them along in the interview. There's nothing wrong with that.
As you're teeing up the next part here about the questions, one of the things that really became apparent as we discussed this topic too, we wanted to share with you, and that is, role playing. And all of a sudden you have people that might have been part of the group that is part of the incident investigation team for your company, part of your steering committee, and they may not have had much experience doing this. So you want to look for people who have had interviewing experience. It might be someone from HR, it might be somebody from loss prevention. And if there isn't a lot of experience within the team, doing some role playing in your committee meetings or any of the meetings, training meetings you have, probably will be helpful for those who have to do the interviewing.
Absolutely. And again, I can't emphasize enough, this is not an interrogation. It's not an interrogation.
Mm-hmm.
We're trying to put them at ease. We're trying to coax them into giving us information they may have and not have them clam up on us. So, here's the thing, this is very cliche: who, what, where, when, how, and how. Those are the tried and true. Stick with those and you're gonna go in the right direction.
Hey, I'm trying to think, now we had a question come in as we're doing this, and I know we're going to get into the reporting, but one of the questions is, do I have to use the OSHA accident incident investigation form, or can I have my own?
You can have your own. You can absolutely have your own. That's a good form to have. It's got a lot of good information on there. It provides direction.
Okay.
Your workers' comp may require the Department of Labor and Industry one as well too. So just consult with your insurance company. But no, there is no mandatory, form, but it should. The one they provide does have a lot of good guidance on it.
Another good question here that came in is, how do you determine the depth of the investigation? The range from someone cut a finger to a fatality. We're getting into a lot of work. People, I would imagine, going there's a lot of work to this. How do I balance that with, we got a business to run?
Absolutely. And that's something where you want to, and that's where you're going to have your team together and say, you know what, at what level do we really start putting a lot more traction into this? And you may say, if it's a recordable injury, if it's a lost time injury. And so again, everything should be looked at though, near miss. They still need to be looked at at the level of what it would be if there's a fatality or an amputation, probably not. But again, that's up to the team and the company to determine what they want to do and how far they want to take it. But certainly look at all of these things, and they all need to be looked at, though.
But part of what we see in the value of this is we talked earlier about building strong safety cultures. That's the mission of our company as a safety partner to hundreds across the upper Midwest. One of the things that we took away from this is, while you want to be careful not to just check the box. So if there is the cut finger, getting to really understand that, to take the learnings and the insights to strengthen your culture and avoid that happening in the future is a big responsibility for leadership. So don't take that lightly, and realize that there's a lot of payback for that time invested, regardless how big or small.
And also think of the morale standpoint. When employees see that you're taking every incident seriously, that's big for morale.
Yeah.
That really makes employees think, you know what, they're looking at all these things, and they're not just taking, oh, so-and-so almost hit Joe with a forklift. Oh, well, it must have just been a freak accident. We need to look at these particular items and say, what went wrong? Why did this happen? So don't be afraid to continue to ask questions as you go forward, no matter how minor it is. Common mistakes to avoid: do not ask leading questions, please. Don't intimidate the witness. You want to ask questions like, I'm sorry, I'm going back a slide. You want to ask questions like, tell me what you saw. Who else saw the incident? Explain how this job is done. How have you done it in the past? Very open-ended questions, and that gets them more comfortable to speak more freely.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And we don't want to do well, do you think this was done, but they did this? And do you think that it was this? And you don't want to be asking those leading questions, and we want to make sure it's an open, clear environment where they can freely talk about what happened.
So we want to just make sure you're all sticking with us now. When is the best time to conduct the interviews? When it's convenient for the witness, or as soon as possible? If you could quickly weigh in, we love to hear your point of view on this. And so far, we think the majority of you are awake, and it's good to see. So speed is of the essence. Thank you for handling that, Heather. So you can see 100% right. Nice job. We'll close these out and move on, because we have a lot to cover yet. We got to get into the report and the whole shebang. So here we go. Let's take a little second there.
So case study number 3, it's the last one. This was a situation where a worker, the owner of the company and his worker were down in a trench. They had a 10-foot trench box in, and then they had about 6 feet of exposed dirt above it. They did not slope it back. And the young employee in the trench, a chunk of dirt came over the top, struck the employee, and there was about 3 feet of water in the bottom of the trench, and it buried him in the water, and that's where he was for 10 hours before they were able to rescue his body. So we look at this situation, we say, well, what the heck happened? And clearly there was not adequate a protection. They should have either sloped it back or had a bigger trench box. There wasn't a good protective system. They didn't mitigate the water that was in the trench. The competent person on site was the owner, and the owner thought that it was acceptable to have the risk of having that exposed earth. So again, let's think about this and say, what was the cause here? Acceptable risk.
One of the questions that has come up is, when OSHA approaches a situation like this, you talked about how this is internally driven, but internally driven, you're going to have to share some of that information with OSHA. Mm-hmm. So what's OSHA's agenda? What lens are they looking at when they approach the company after a situation like this, a very serious one?
That's a good question. When OSHA shows up, their job is to determine if there were violations of the OSHA Act. That is their job. They cannot issue citations unless there's a violation of the OSHA Act. They do have general duty clause, which gives them a little more freedom, but just know that their investigation may not identify root causes and may not get to the culture side of thing, the lack of accountability. They're going to have bad system, no competent person. So just know that your investigation, may have much more detailed results as to how you're going to correct this going forward.
So they're going to look for training documentation.
100%.
They're going to look for all of that. And so that's to flip it around then, because that's a very serious situation. For example, fatality, as an owner, I'd feel terrible. as an owner, does that mean I share everything and anything with OSHA when they approach me about this? Or is it still the similar rules of the road that as if they had showed up for a programmed
Yeah.
visit?
I have to be careful how I answer this. When OSHA shows up, they're there to do a job and know that they are there to do a job. And, I encourage everybody, be cordial, be polite, give them what they ask for, but don't offer anything more than what they're asking for. You may identify issues internally that you're going to address, and maybe they didn't address, but you know that you're going to address it. So just know you cooperate with them, you are cordial, you provide them what they need. However, we're keeping our own internal investigation to ourselves as far as certain areas that they may not necessarily go into.
So part of the thing we want to emphasize is the primary purpose is how do you take the learning from this, as Justin said earlier, and improve the safety culture and avoid it from happening in the future. One of the things that all of this work does provide, though, is documentation, some of which would be appropriate for OSHA, some of which would be appropriate for your insurance company, and so situations such as that. So you're really through this investigation process trying to address a number of different things and organizations through it all.
Absolutely. And excuse me. So now when we're looking at analyzing the evidence, this is where we're looking at everything. We're looking at our sketches, we're looking at our pictures, we're looking at are there any standard operating procedures? Are there lockout procedures? We're taking anything that pertained to our investigation and we're analyzing it and saying, let's look into this and let's see if we can identify potential issues. So, was the safe work procedure used? Were the appropriate tools being used? Was the required PPE being worn? So all this stuff we're going to be looking at as we're analyzing all of the stuff we accumulated during our investigation. Was there an equipment malfunction? Was there equipment failure? All this stuff needs to be looked at. Did someone modify something? There are a ton of possibilities, and we need to make sure we're open to looking at all of this.
So when, pausing on the equipment failure part of this, Justin, so, if you make a modification to equipment, that could open up another set of issues.
100%.
So now all of a sudden, the equipment's not being utilized for what the manufacturer originally intended it to be used for, which may in turn might be part of the root cause. We don't know.
Yep.
How often does that occur from your experience when you look at equipment and got involved in investigations? Was there a lot of modifications that took place?
Yeah. People get pretty creative, I'll be honest with you. And a lot of times they'll, we took this off a machine because it works better this way, or we just decided to cut this off. And so people don't always recognize what they're doing when they don't intend to cause an accident, but they just don't realize, what, I guess just how serious, things could end up and when you start doing those.
So there's got to be a lot of thought to, as in any case, any modifications you make, what could be the intended or unintended repercussions of that. Question came in, do you ever have one person do the investigation, then turn over the evidence to someone that wasn't involved in the investigation to do the analysis? So, using different parties to help in the process?
Yeah, that may be a good process. I would say you want to have as many people part of the process as possible. You may have an independent party review that later on, and that's fine. There's nothing wrong with that. Just know that this is an open, there's not an exact procedure. We're giving you a general outline, but just know that doesn't mean that you can improve upon what we already have in place right here. So by having it objectively looked at by a third party, there's nothing wrong with that. That sounds like a good idea, actually. So yeah, absolutely. So reviewing training records, again, this is part of the process. Were they trained? How well were they trained? All that stuff. Do they have experience? We're looking at all of these things, and that's going to help us again sort out, where are the underlying issues. So, and now we're into writing the report. Well, we got a quick poll.
It is who's written one of these reports before. It doesn't matter what template or format you've used, but one is, hey, I've written one before. Two is not. We want to get a gauge again for how much experience we have on the call here. And so far, it looks like about 70% have done an incident report, which is great, and almost a third have not. So that's a good quick read on where people are at. We appreciate that. Thank you, Heather, and we're good to go. Over 70% have done it. So you can close out that box, and there we go.
All right. All right, here we go. It's gonna go eventually.
We
Bear
get
with
into
us.
environmental factors is the next thing that we're going to talk about.
Yeah, so that's an important part too. We're taking a look around at the whole environment and saying, was there something that may have contributed to this? There may be the snow and ice on a scaffold system where somebody slipped. I mean, there could be, water in a trench that, contributed to the collapse of a trench. What time of day did it occur? What was the temperature? So we want to, depending on where you're at, if you're outside, indoors, this is something you want to consider. We want to try to not rule anything out. And so the more we document, the better we can analyze it later and say, and even if it wasn't relevant, we just push it off to the side and say, still had it, wasn't relevant, but yeah. So then we're writing the incident report. We want to make sure we understand the intent of the incident report to make sure it does not happen again. We covered that numerous times. We're not placing blame. We're not fault finding here. We're just gathering facts to make the best assessment, and then make sure a written report is, we can also use these as training tools for our committee members, for other team members going forward. So 6 sections in an incident report: who, what, where, when, describe what happened, findings, corrective actions, conclusion, and then the appendix might be pictures and training documents and things like that. So those are kind of how we organize the report. Section 1, who was it? Who was injured? Who were witnesses? Where? Location of the incident, date, time, shift. We want to identify those particular items. Description of what happened prior, during, and after. Again, section 3, findings, direct cause, indirect cause. So we may have one or both on a situation or none. Corrective actions, system improvements for section 4. This is where we're going to get into, this is what we recommend is done to help prevent this from happening in the future. And system improvements, we need to beef up our SOP. We need to beef up our lockout tagout procedure, whatever the case may be. Section 5 is the conclusion. This is our estimated cost. And OSHA actually has a calculator where you can put in say a finger amputation. They can actually determine or assess how much the approximate cost would be of the entire accident start to finish. And you would be amazed. It is a ton of money. And so the conclusion, estimated cost, this is who's going to be helping, get rid of the safety issues or improve upon the safety of the situation. Describe the intended results of the positive impact of the suggested trainings. Because we're implementing a better lockout program, we expect to see this not reoccur in the future. And then the date that the actions were actually done. And then appendixes are printouts, sketches, things like that.
So one of the questions that came up too, just again to check, this template can be found on the OSHA website.
Mm-hmm.
And it's fairly standard.
Mm-hmm.
And your earlier question was, can I use my own or a different version?
Mm-hmm.
Yes, you can.
Mm-hmm.
What's good about the one that they have here is it helps give you an idea of what kind of information is going to be most useful for you.
Yep.
And we know that there are a number of different templates that safety professionals have created over the years, but this is a good way for you to compare, the most foundational framework, if you will, with others. We have a question here.
Mm-hmm.
And the question is it recommended to put a piece of equipment immediately into lockout tagout when an injury has occurred? Under what conditions can the equipment be returned into service? So here, we've been preaching speed to the incident,
Yep.
speed to get the investigation going. There's a business to run. There may be someone who's, hurt, not so serious or seriously. What do you do?
So I'm going to use discretion when you have to be cautious. How serious was the injury? If we know OSHA is going to be coming out and responding to this, and I know that could be difficult to determine. And so there's a lot of factors involved in this decision, but if it's serious enough, and I know that's not a very good answer, we may want to shut that down until we know for a fact that OSHA either sends a letter or, so again, we're talking amputations, we're talking, fatalities where we are required to report those to OSHA, because OSHA will ask you are not required to hold the scene. They will ask you to do that. And so you may want, if you need to bring that machine back online, if you document everything, take pictures and do a good job of that, and then provide it to them when they get there, that could be an alternative. It's a difficult question to answer because it depends on the situation. I know that's not a good answer, but it just really, Yes. So
Well, one of the factors that comes to mind too is in weighing that business decision. So, by OSHA's expectations, they don't expect you to shut it down if someone's injured. But it sounds like the best practice is you would until they show up. But again, you got to make a business decision. The other thing is how much risk is there in it happening again?
Mhm.
Is there something that changed with that piece of equipment that might put the next operator at risk? And so those are all things, variables that have to be considered.
Absolutely. If it's a situation where the machine caused that injury and you put it back online before, you're opening yourself up to a lot of potential issues with exposing employees after knowingly seeing an issue with the machine. So again, there's a lot of factors involved.
So, OSHA is not, if it's a serious, incident here, that may be a day or two till they show up. It's not going to be instant.
Yep.
And, have you ever seen companies that followed a process and actually started to implement some of the improvements based on the recommendations you have on the screen? You're like, they've already acted on these recommendations, or do you need to wait before OSHA shows up?
No, I've seen companies that are very proactive where by the time I showed up, they're like, we've already made our determination. We've already done our process, our investigation, and sometimes they give it to you, sometimes they don't. More often than not, that transparency thing it's a tricky one. You want to be transparent, but again, there are some limitations to that. But oftentimes the ones that that have a really good process, they say, hey, here's our investigation report, here's our interview statements. And so again, I've been to places where when it's an effective system, it's already mainly done by the time we even get out there.
So
we get out there.
So in alignment with some of the key takeaways that you're teaching us here, Justin, is, speed matters, being equipped, having the tools that you need to do the investigation. The interview process sounds really strategic in terms of getting and talking to the right people, and documentation. One of the things that I gathered from you here is that, when you talked about the sixth section here, is that's where all the other stuff goes that may not have fit in the first other sections, that may have more relevance later on as you start to get even deeper. But I heard speed, I heard lots of documentation, but I'm also hearing don't get stuck in bureaucracy. Use this group to communicate with leadership and implement quickly some of the improvements or changes that should be beneficial to the company.
Absolutely.
You don't have to wait for OSHA. You don't have to wait for things to get tested or figure out, is this going to work? Apply common sense.
Yep, absolutely.
Okay.
And whether or not you bring that machine back online again, OSHA is going to do interviews. They're going to do the whole process where they're still going to figure out what took place, even if the scene is no longer there. Just know that they will do, use those kind of methods when they're out there. So.
A question came up, and it has to do with, does an employee have to agree to be interviewed by the company and/or OSHA?
That's a very good question, and the answer is no. We want to encourage employees to speak up and share what they know if they feel comfortable. We cannot force an employee to do that. There are times where witnesses, I've asked for interviews and they're like, they didn't even come back. They pursued a new job. I've had some where they clam up and they, just know that emotions are usually heightened in situations like this, and it's the employer, it's the employees, it's the family. Then you bring OSHA in and it can be a really dramatic situation. So just know that you want to encourage it, you want to try to make them at ease so they feel comfortable doing that, but we cannot force somebody to do that.
So you may hear a little construction, speaking of which, in the background here on our building that's going on. But one thing we wanted to say too is, along those lines, maybe a written statement from them is going to be more comfortable than coming in and having to talk to someone. And that's happened in some of the investigations that you told me about.
Yep.
So that's pretty important. So
yeah,
back to you.
So what we learned, we're just going to quickly summarize this. What's the difference between an accident and near miss? What to do at the scene of an incident, how to interview, and how to write an incident report. That's kind of in a nutshell what we covered. Hopefully we did a good enough job where you feel like you've gotten something out of this, and you feel now, if nothing else, we need to look at this and be prepared.
So we have a series of things, some more recommendations too we'd like to add on here for you. And thanks, Justin, for getting us to this point. Another quick poll, we'd like to just do another gut check here. We had the first one at the front end, And a number of you are feeling pretty good. You're ready. You have a process and training in place. Are you a 1 after going through this? You retain that 1. Are you a 2? Are you a 3? It's just good to kind of do a check. And then we have some other things that we want to share with you that we think might be of help, because a number of you are our clients. We know many of you, and or are members of associations that we partner with and provide safety support for. So, and other folks in our network, but primarily a lot of our clients and folks in our network through the associations here. And we want to share some of the additional information with you that we think will help. And as the results roll in here, Heather, if you could share the results, that would be great. We think maybe a little more folks landed on 2.
Yeah.
It looks like
A little bit
that's
of
good.
work. Yeah,
Yep,
there's nothing wrong with that.
That would be expected, and we'll shut this down and we'll go on to the next slide. But one of the things we wanted to ask you to do a quick read, and then I'll share with some more information. If you could take one final poll and just give us a view of how you see it. 3, great information. This is very helpful. A 2, if you thought you got some good information and a few takeaways, or 1, if we were way off and missed the mark. But we're hoping that you got some great info and it was very helpful, and you'll of course let us know otherwise. But if you could weigh in on that final poll for us, that would be great. And then we're going to share with you some additional information about OECS and some of the things that we're doing to help people with this process. Because what's unique about OECS is we have 4 OSHA investigators, former investigators on our team. A couple have done consultation as well. And we have over 20 safety experts, and we have a number of things that we'd like to share with you about that. And so when we go to the next slide here, and this will kind of tee up here, what we can do is we can provide a lot of virtual support, of course, through a number of things that we do. And if you could just shut that down, I think that might help on the screen.
Mm-hmm.
And then we also have on-site safety services that we provide. So we talked about, again, for our clients, some of you may not be aware that, we've added the capability we've added quite a bit of capability in the learning management system, so we can go digital with you there through training. We also have added a lot of other tools. If you go to the next slide here on our virtual offerings, we've got a number of toolbox talks. We have more webinars on our website. We'd encourage you to visit on a number of other safety topics. We think all of these can work together in unison to help elevate your safety game. And if you go to the next slide, there's a lot of on-site things we can do too. And if you'd like one of the folks from our team to come visit your facility and walk through what an action plan in this nature looks like to be prepared for an investigation, whatever you need, we're there for you. So that's what OECS does. And when we go to the last slide, the other thing we're excited to do is, each month we'll have a safety webinar for you. And we have now 10 on our website you can visit, but the next one coming up is in February. And Cody Hedberg and Dan Dustin, 2 really experienced folks in the construction field, will be going through trenching and excavation safety.
Good, yeah.
Yep. So a lot of pictures in this one, a lot of show and tell. We think you're going to enjoy that to kind of get a read on it. And the last slide here, we'll hold it here, is, and we're going to field a few more questions. Here's our contact information. And one of the questions, do we do any training online? Yes, we do. We do 10-hour OSHA was the question. We do 30-hour OSHA. We just have one of those going on now. So we are able to deliver virtual training if you need the 10-hour, 30-hour. MUPS training we also do as well. So we can help you with that, and would be happy to do that as well.
MUPS?
That's mobile elevated workplace platform.
Yeah.
Yes. So we have 11 people who are certified to do that training, and we can do the training virtually, and then the hands-on we coordinate on site as well. So lots to do there. And we want to thank you for joining us and participating, and hope you have a great rest of your day.
Thank you.
So I think if you mute and
Hey, Tim, on your screen, you